Nzinga Mvemba, also known as King Afonso I, was the sixth ruler of the Kingdom of Congo from the Lukanakanta dynasty and ruled in the first half of the 16th century. He reigned over the Congo Empire from 1509 to late 1542 or 1543. At the time of the first arrival of the Portuguese to the Kingdom of the Congo's capital of Congo in 1491, Mvemba Nzinga was in his 30s, and was the ruler of Nsunde province in the northeast, and the likely heir to the throne. He took the name Afonso when he was baptized after his father decided to convert to Christianity. He studied with Portuguese priests and advisors for 10 years in the kingdom's capital. Letters written by priests to the King of Portugal paint Afonso as an enthusiastic and scholarly convert to Christianity. Around 1495, the Mani Congo denounced Christianity, and Afonso welcomed the priests into the capital of his Nsunde province. To the displeasure of many in the realm, he had traditional art objects that might offend Portuguese sensibilities destroyed. In 1506, King João I of Congo, the name Nzinga took upon his conversion, died, and potential rivals lined up to take over the kingdom. Congo was an elective rather than a hereditary monarchy, so Afonso was not guaranteed the throne. Afonso was assisted in his attempt to become king by his mother, who kept news of João's death a secret, and arranged for Afonso to return to the capital city of Congo and gather his followers. When the death of the king was finally announced, Afonso was already in the city. A final piece of incidental information concerns the presence of Christianity. Although it is sometimes believed that Christianity did not survive the reign of Afonso, an impression created in part by the slanderous correspondence of Jesuit missionaries and São Tomé officials written against Diogo, in fact, all the actors appear as fairly solid Christians. For example, when he first broke the plan to Afonso, Dom Pedro asked him first to swear on a holy Bible to keep it a secret, Gal. 2v. Furthermore, Diogo apparently observed the right of Christian asylum in the church enough to allow Pedro to operate from a church for years after his deposition, even though officials from that same church were important witnesses in the trial and obviously played a significant part in revealing the plot. Foles. 2R-2v, 4v, 5R-5v, 8. Both Pedro and Diogo respected the decisions of the Pope in the question of succession, and both thought to obtain the requisite bulls recognizing them as rulers of Congo. Battle of Congo. The strongest opposition to Afonso's claim came from his half-brother Mpanzu Akirima or Mpanzu Nzinga. Mpanzu raised an army in the provinces and made plans to march on Congo. Afonso's adherence to Catholicism was seemingly rewarded when he fought traditionalists led by his brother Mpanza for succession to the throne. His victory was attributed to a miracle described by the chronicler Pava Manso, who said the army of Mpanzu Akirima, though outnumbering Afonso's, fled in terror at the apparition of Saint James the Great and 5 heavenly armored horsemen in the sky. The story, first recounted in a letter that was not survived by Afonso himself, is open to many interpretations, including allegory covering up a coup and the forcing out of anti-Catholic elements within the royal house. What is known is that Mpanzu either fell into a sort of Pinchi trap during his army's route or was executed by Afonso after the battle. The Portuguese are never mentioned as participating in the battle, either by the missionaries present in the kingdom or by Afonso in his letters to Portugal's king. Christianity became the royal faith from then on, and the miracle was immortalized in Congo's coat of arms. The coat of arms was in use in Congo until at least 1860. Virtually all that is known about Congo in the time of Afonso's reign is known from his long series of letters, written in Portuguese, primarily to the kings Manuel and João III of Portugal. The letters are often very long and give many details about the administration of the country. Many letters complain about the behavior of several Portuguese officials, and these letters have given rise to an interpretation of Afonso's reign as one in which Portuguese interests submerged Afonso's ambitions. He reigned over the Prince Congo Empire from 1509 to late 1542 or 1543. During this time Afonso I had an increasingly awkward relationship with Portugal. This relationship came to a head during the latter half of the 1520s when the Congo slave trade was at its peak, a direct result of Portuguese traders violating the law of Afonso I concerning who could and who could not be sold as a slave. The Portuguese actively subverted Afonso I by going through his vassals. Afonso I expressed a great deal of irritation with the Portuguese in a letter he wrote in 1514. In this letter Afonso I openly stated he would like to have full control of the Congo-Portuguese slave trade. The Portuguese did not approve of this measure and the situation progressively got worse. The slave trade continued unabated until it was resolved in 1526. Afonso I in 1526 created a commission to investigate the origin of any individual who was to be sold as a slave. This helped put an end to the illegal slave trade occurring in the Congo. Although Afonso was outspokenly opposed to slavery and initially fought the Portuguese demand for human beings, he eventually relented in order to sustain the economy of the Congo. Initially Afonso sent war captives and criminals to be sold as slaves to the Portuguese. Eventually, Portuguese demand for slaves exceeded the country's potential supply, prompting them to search for slaves in neighboring regions. Afonso let this situation continue for as long as it did in an attempt to not be overtly rude to the Portuguese, as he had actively required their help to solve various conflicts within his kingdom. Afonso I also had been attempting to resolve the situation diplomatically through letters to the Vatican as well as to Portugal. The responses told him that they had little intention of altering the actions of the Portuguese traders. The Portuguese regarded the slave trade as nothing more than typical commerce. This is why the commission was established. The Portuguese showed clear disdain with the condition of the slave economics of the Congo and made a failed attempt to assassinate Afonso I in 1540. During his reign Afonso I leveraged other desirable resources to consolidate his power and to maintain the status quo with Portugal, mainly gold, iron, and copper. These resources were the bargaining chips that allowed Afonso I to negotiate with the Portuguese, but also to insulate himself from them as well to a lesser extent. In Adam Hochschild's 1998 book King Leopold's Ghost, Hochschild characterizes Afonso as a selective modernizer, because he welcomed European scientific innovation and the Church, but refused to adopt Portugal's legal code and sell land to prospectors. In fact, Afonso ridiculed the Ordenações Manuelinas, new Portuguese law code, when he read it in 1516, asking the Portuguese emissary de Castro, "What is the punishment, Castro, for putting one's feet on the ground?" No contemporary record mentions anything about land sales. Indeed, land in Congo was never sold to anyone. In 1526 Afonso wrote a series of letters condemning the violent behavior of the Portuguese in his country and the establishment of the transatlantic slave trade. At one point he accused them of assisting brigands in his own country and illegally purchasing free people as slaves. He also threatened to close the trade altogether. However, in the end, Afonso established an examination committee to determine the legality of all enslaved persons presented for sale. Afonso was a determined soldier and extended Congo's effective control to the south. His letter of the 5th of October 1514 reveals the connections between Afonso's men, Portuguese mercenaries in Congo's service, and the capture and sale of slaves by his forces, many of which he retained in his own service. In 1526 Afonso wrote 2 letters concerning the slave trade to the King of Portugal, decrying the rapid destabilization of his kingdom as the Portuguese slave traders intensified their efforts. In one of his letters he writes, "Each day the traders are kidnapping our people, children of this country, sons of our nobles and vassals, even people of our own family. This corruption and depravity are so widespread that our land is entirely depopulated. We need in this kingdom only priests and school teachers, and no merchandise, unless it is wine and flour for mass. It is our wish that this kingdom not be a place for the trade or transport of slaves. Many of our subjects eagerly lust after Portuguese merchandise that your subjects have brought into our domains. To satisfy this inordinate appetite, they seize many of our black free subjects. They sell them. After having taken these prisoners to the coast, secretly or at night. As soon as the captives are in the hands of white men, they are branded with a red-hot iron." Afonso believed that the slave trade should be subject to Congo law. When he suspected the Portuguese of receiving illegally enslaved persons to sell, he wrote in to King João III in 1526 imploring him to put a stop to the practice. Afonso was also concerned about the depopulating of his kingdom through the exportation of his own citizens. The King of Portugal responded to Afonso's concerns, writing that because the Congo purchases their slaves from outside of the kingdom and converts them to Christianity and then intermarries them, the kingdom probably maintains a high population and must not even notice the missing subjects. To lessen Afonso's concerns, the king suggested sending 2 men to a designated point in the city to monitor who is being traded and who could object to any sale involving a subject of Afonso's kingdom. The King of Portugal then wrote that if he were to cease the slave trade from the inside of the Congo, he would still require provisions from Afonso, such as wheat and wine. Toward the end of his life, Afonso's children and grandchildren began maneuvering for the succession, and in 1540 plotters that included Portuguese residents in the country made an unsuccessful attempt on his life. He died toward the end of 1542, or perhaps at the very beginning of 1543, leaving his son Pedro to succeed him. Although his son was soon overthrown by his grandson Diogo in 1545 and had to take refuge in a church, the grandchildren and later descendants of 3 of his daughters provided many later kings. If you enjoyed this video, kindly let me know in the comments section. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks.